everybody. It's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 171, as the Flyers are generating a lot of news on and mainly off the ice right now. And we have something called the World Junior Championships upcoming. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. So we're real excited. We have probably the best guests you could have to deal with all of these issues, but we'll do that momentarily. Let's introduce our panel. To my left, as usual, it is Chef B. And what's on your mind tonight, friend?
Oh, there's a lot of things. Every day it's a little bit of drama with this team. And I tell you what, I knew this season was going to be anything but boring, and it has not let down. So I'll just leave it at that point.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. So we're also proud to have back on after a little bit of a hiatus, the great Dan Silver. Brother, how are you?
Doing all right. I'm recovering from the Vegas cold. I was out there for a couple weeks, and I'm just getting over a little cold. So my voice is a little hoarse, but I feel a lot better than I felt over the last week, and really enjoying watching some young kids at the pre-tournament games today in the World Juniors. So it's kind of nice to be able to watch some of these kids, including a pretty special Flyers prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. I've caught a couple of those myself, a little bit fast forward today through the USA game. And we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch of stuff. Before we get to that and bring our guest on, just want to remind people that the O&B Puckcast is on 12 podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. Tune in. We have a YouTube channel, just plug in O&B Puckcast. And of course, we have a Facebook page. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, and Getter as a backup plan at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. And it really is important if you will subscribe or follow whatever the platform dictates, because it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcast, and we get more listens, and you'll get those notifications, and it'll come right into your platform lineup, and it really helps us out. So we do appreciate that. So without any further ado, from Off the Post podcast, Locked On Flyers podcast, sportsology.com. He's on XM radio as a regular. He's everywhere. His name is Russ Cohen. How you doing?
Good, Isaiah. How are you? Chef,
all right.
Dan, nice to see you guys.
Yeah. So
it's always great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Russ, you're just one of the best. And right now, before we get to the WJC, I just wanted to cover as the Flyers turn. I wish I had the Oregon music for the old soap operas back in the day, because I think there's four major storylines right now. Is Sedlak leaves, and he just wasn't really happy here. Why don't we start there? That was kind of strange. And it was like a nicer version of, what's the Russian guy? Zherdev. It was like a nicer version of Zherdev.
Yeah, when you start the story, it's like he was supposed to play for Colorado. Then he couldn't break the lineup in Colorado, so they waive him and the Flyers get him. So then I think he was thinking, all right, I had Torts before. We'll see, how he is here. And I think based on the way the team was doing and just how hard this coach can run a guy, he was probably just like, if this were a playoff team, I'd probably go through these steps. But since it's not, I'm just not into it. And, and he played okay. But I think in the end, it just was one of those things where he felt like it was a chore to show up to the rink. And, I don't know that for sure, but that's my guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, he was actually pretty effective in his role, which was basically a stabilizer. And
Mhm.
Flyers really have nothing at center, even as Morgan Frost comes on and plays a little bit better. Now, Russ, before I go to anybody else, just the whole thing about Artem Anisimov. I just don't think he came here to ride buses and be a mentor. And
No,
he
he
has
definitely did
NHL
not.
level talent. And I still think it would be helpful for the Flyers to have him on the roster with setback out because look, their center depth just is non-existent, especially with Kevin Hayes being moved to the wing.
Yeah, of course it would help. I mean, then Frost could play second line center, be better for him. The matchups would be better. Again, I get that the Flyers like what he's doing with their younger players, but it's temporary. Like if Artem Anisimov keeps scoring at the rate he's at, some other team is gonna sign him at some point. So why don't you be the team that signs him? And if he works well at the NHL level, what's the rule that says you can't sign him for next year? Like why? Not everybody has to be 25 and under. You can't have a full team like that. So again, it's just I don't understand what they're thinking. I know that he is helping guys, and that's great, but you have to also think about the player at some point too.
Sure, and it becomes a trade chip if he plays well enough. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, Chef.
Yeah, we were talking about it like before you guys jumped on, like long-term injured reserve, IR. What I mean, there's a lot of people out there quacking and chirping, and I'm sure they don't know. And I'm a little befuddled myself. Is what's the difference? Like somebody said, "Oh, we'll just put Cam on long-term injured reserve, and then you got room. We got all this money, and all that stuff." And I don't really. I know that's just not the right answer, but
No,
I
I
don't
mean,
know the correct answer myself.
yeah, you do get money, but again, you have to wait till the start of the season. So, like when you have a guy like that, and you're not sure of the status, you can't do anything over the summer with a guy who may or may not be on LTIR until they show up. And then it's all like, okay, yeah, we're going to put him now. They certainly could have put Cam on that earlier if they wanted to, sign Goudreau during the summer or something, because they had to have known it was a long shot based on what they knew about his injury that he would even play this year. But again, they took the other side, being eternal optimists, which is not working out well for them.
No.
And so, here they are. As far as getting someone completely off the books, you have to have a long-term injury guy that basically is not coming back, and then you could trade that to another team to gain the full cap space. But again, you're gonna have to give up a prospect or picks to do that, and that's the only way you're getting truly out of it. Otherwise, you're getting a large percentage, but you're only getting a percentage out of it every season.
Gotcha. So Coots might come back. Okay, Sean Couturier may come back late February, early March. Bobby Brink could be cleared at some point. He goes to see a doctor tomorrow. The Flyers injuries. What's your
bets? I'm taking bets on if Couturier is going to be back. You guys are all welcome to. I'll offer a huge price if you think he's going to be back in February. You guys can get rich off of it.
Yeah, I don't think you will.
Why would we ever trust anything that this team tells us about?
I mean, I get the mistrust. It's just, my feeling is, why would he rush back anyhow? Like, why would they rush him back anyhow? So I feel like they're giving the still best case scenario situation. And, when he hits the ice, he'll probably find out that, yeah, it's going to take a little longer. And then it may get to the point where it's going to be like, well, should he even come back this year? Why risk it? I mean, I just feel like they should get to that point sooner than, worrying about if he can play in February.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think best case scenario for them would be if there's a chance of him coming back, maybe you give him 10 games at the end of the season for himself just for, I guess, that mental victory.
I give him one game. I'm not giving him 10 games.
No,
if he needs one game over the summer to feel good about it, I'll give him one game.
All right, yeah, because I know, like, after you have like a devastating injury, you've been cooped up for that long. You kind of like need those moral victories. You need those little ones like that just to get, if nothing, just to get the hell out of the house.
You do, but again, I go back to when they had the Dave Scott press conference, and off to the side, Couturier was actually skating, and then that was a while ago, and then he went and ended up not doing well and getting a surgery and everything. And it's like, so I'm giving him one game. Game, you'll feel better. And guess what? I might only give you a half a game, but I'll let you get out there. I'll let you, do what you can do, and then that's it. I'm not risking anymore because I would like to see him back next year. I don't know what capacity he'll be back. Can he be a top line center anymore? I don't know. Back injuries are tough. I mean, I don't want to go, and state like Tim Kerr because I don't know the difference between one back injury or the other, but you saw what happened to Tim Kerr. I mean, it killed his career. It eventually killed John LeClair's career too. I mean, so you never know.
You just don't know. There's a multitude of endpoints with that. And he's got a contract through 2030, so I'm in
there's
no
no rush.
No rush at all. So Bobby Brink would be bound for Lehigh Valley either way, I would imagine.
Yeah, he should stay there the rest of the season. No questions asked. You want to bring him up a game or two at the end of the year. If he's staying healthy, fine. But that's it. No other reason to put him in the lineup.
Yeah, coming off the hip injury like that, you got to figure he's going to need at least half a season and then a summer to rehab some more.
And we don't know what his skating will be like then.
Yeah, we don't even know. We don't exactly. We don't know what he was to begin with. So
right.
Exactly. So and there's two other major storylines right now. To me, the pettiest one is the Kevin Hayes situation where, look, John Tortorella is kind of doing, I think Broad Street Hockey had an article, and I essentially agree with that. They talked about you wanted accountability for, to be enforced by the coach. And Hackstall's version of that was sitting younger players and playing these veterans that really weren't accountable, even though they were screwing up as much as the kids. Well, John Tortorella.
Van de Velde never screwed up. He just didn't do much.
Right. He couldn't get from point A to point B to screw up, So, yeah. So the idea here is that looking forward, whether Kevin Hayes has a future with this organization or not, which it seems more and more doubtful as time goes on, that, he just doesn't want these kids to see the hypocrisy. And he doesn't want there to be this false hierarchy that you had under Hackstall. He was a green coach at that time, so it was a different scenario. But and Kevin Hayes is not happy. He's more or less pushing back. I think something could happen maybe with this player in the offseason, but I don't think it's going to be a buyout like Elliot Freeman.
No, it won't be a buyout. It doesn't help anybody. But again, Kevin Hayes should know better and should realize that his ice time is going to depend on his coach being happy with him. Even yesterday, he had ice time cut from him. He played the same amount of time as Zach McEwen. So, if that's his goal is, then keep playing the way you're playing because that last game for him was awful. I had to tweet. It was bad. I just put the words woof because it was what else am I going to put when I see a guy gliding out there? Even the one shot that he had on net, he barely put anything behind it. So it's if you got something that wrong, then sit. And if nothing's wrong, then play. And if you don't want to play, then you know what? You'll get paid. And Torts will, minimize your ice time. He won't make a big deal about it. He probably won't sit him again. And I don't know if they could trade him. I mean, again, I was on a show with Kevin Allen, and he was like, listen, this is the kind of malaise that Kevin Hayes has gotten into before. So, knowing that, he's probably going back to the Chicago days and maybe even the early part of the Ranger regime there until he really started to kick in. Scoring's not everything. And I think Kevin Hayes should know better about that. Just because you're having your best scoring year doesn't really help the big picture. And that's where I actually agree with the coach.
Yeah, the Kevin Hayes situation to me is the most sort of interesting and important one going on with the team right now. It's wild to me, the lack of effort that he put in last night.
Yeah.
And I tweeted that I've never seen a player look more disinterested. And he was just floating around the ice. And when you combine that with the fact that he'd been healthy scratched the game before, you would think that if he cared whatsoever about what the coach thought about him, he would go out there and he would bust his ass. He did the complete opposite. If I'm John Tortorella, what Kevin Hayes did in the most recent game is a complete slap in the face. I'd bench him for the next week. I don't know what he'll do, but if he keeps playing like that, I have to think he's going to get benched again. And it's going to set up a huge conflict between, the front office. Chuck Fletcher signed into this huge contract. They can't buy him out. They're going to have to find a way to trade him. They're going to have to. But they're bargaining. Chuck Fletcher, can't bargain with anyone to begin with. And this puts him in an even worse spot. I mean, what are they going to give up to get someone to take Kevin Hayes? It's just a very bad situation. I've heard that Hayes is maybe not the best guy off the ice in terms of setting an example for the young kids. And now on the ice, I feel like he's also not setting an example. So I think this one has the potential to get very ugly, is what I think.
Well, the team sort of rebranded overnight, and it was kind of interesting in the locker room where, well, first it was Tortorella 3 times was saying how they're a young team. So, and it's like, all of a sudden they're a young team. Like Justin Braun's there, James Van Riemsdyk's there, Kevin Hayes is there, Nick Seeler's there. How young are they? What do we define as young? They were calling Travis Konecny young now. And it's like, listen, Travis Konecny, just because he may have to be 25, doesn't make him young. He's not young. To me, young is your 21, 22, 23, Noah Cates. That's young. So they're trying to rebrand this team now, and on the fly here, literally, and it just seems silly. And even Kevin Hayes had to speak about Travis Konecny and say, well, yeah, he's been here a while, but he's only 25. And when he was answering questions about him, it's almost like there were talking points. And so I don't like it. I don't think it's helpful for the fans or anybody to all of a sudden, go from what, Chuck said over the summer of this. We knew they were heading in a different direction. We don't need a roadmap for that. But still, you shouldn't try and tell everybody that, we're a young team now, because they're not that young.
Yep, we got to take off the orange and black glasses, Chef.
Oh, I think there was I tweeted it out. It was NHL Network tweeted out a breakdown of the last 3 games of Kevin Hayes, and they showed in certain areas. I mean, Harty was on it, and I forget who else was on it, and they were breaking down all the times where Hayes didn't follow through it to check. He didn't do this. He didn't do, and it's not it's like a 4-minute clip, and you're sitting in there listening to it, and you're like, wow, like. When you really focused on him, you could really see the difference in the last 3-4 games of him not caring at all. It seemed like, I think last night's game, when he was out there being a dead fish, so to speak, I saw a complete opposite from like JVR line. There's a pop in JVR step now. There's a pop in Morgan Frost. Dan, I'll give you this is what Dan was speaking about with him the last couple games now of what he could be, and we were all waiting for it. It came out. Allison looked pretty decent on his first day back. He was around like the little pinball that he is, and Tippett, that whole line played very well. Mm-hmm. Everybody had the adverse reaction to what Kevin Hayes was doing out on that ice. People, even Justin Braun, seemed to have a little bit of a pep in his step. I think what Hayes is doing, I don't know if it's rubbing the rest of the team the wrong way, and their efforts seem to be double last night. The other lines that came out there, Zach McEwen and Nick Delore, they seemed like they were over like zealous and overperforming just to try to make up for Hayes.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think Lawton gets hurt here because, Hayes starts the game off on the second line, and then Lawton has to sort of fill in the gaps when Hayes is sitting this extra time. So I feel like Lawton doesn't get a chance to play with the right line mates now, yeah. And so we're seeing a little lull in his game, and that's where I think Hayes does affect his other teammates.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Pierre-Luc Dubois scenario, except there's no Patrick Liney in the offing for the Flyers. And it'd be a very interesting situation to watch. The Flyers won 2 out of their last 3, but going into last night's game, they had been winless in 17 of their last 20. So
sure, but and we also have to take into account third string goalie. I mean, Tarasov is an okay goalie, but he didn't play well. They have a lot of guys hurt, 11 guys or something. I mean, it was 4-3 for a moment, and the fact that it even got to 4-3 is bad.
Well, they had a
win, but still.
Yeah, they generated more higher quality chances than the Flyers, and then the Columbus was a depleted team, so more depleted even than the Flyers. So yeah, I mean, listen, we know who the Flyers are. So that brings us to the final storyline for the Flyers, and to me, it's the biggest one. It's the one we've been waiting for. There's all these rumors right now that Chuck Fletcher is not long for his position. It's only a matter of whether he's going to separate completely from the organization or whether he's going to be kicked upstairs. to just the president of hockey operations in some capacity, and they're going to move Danny Briere in there. And we just had your buddy Shane Malloy on here last show, and it's like, this is really no way to. Yeah, is it an improvement over what we've seen? Probably, but if you're talking about mid-range or 5-year look at what the Flyers are going to be, I mean, this is really no way to run the organization.
No, I mean, look, player development still needs a lot of help. Danny's going to need help. He can't just walk into a GM position. He still hasn't done enough in my eyes to be a full-fledged GM. So you still have to have, to me, someone from the outside come in and help him. If it's, all of a sudden Chuck will help him, but Chuck's the president, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. That's, Danny doesn't have enough to draw on yet for the kind of situation that the Flyers are in, because if you're not going to go through a full rebuild, then you have to be very aware of what you have, what you can get, what you're going to draft, pick wise, all these other things. How many contacts do you have around the league? Who can you make trades with? Like, he's new at it. It's not going to be easy. So I feel like, I know the fans are like, well, if we get Briere in there, it's fine. And they were all hoping when he got back from the Spengler Cup that all of a sudden he's the guy. Well, he's back from the Spengler Cup and they still haven't made a move. So it wouldn't shock me if Chuck rides this year out, and it wouldn't shock me if they brought in somebody from the outside. But, in the end, just Danny is not enough.
I totally agree, Dan.
Yeah, but this is where, if he is going to be the guy that, that they want him to become as a GM, like he's going to have to come in. And if he has the autonomy to make some moves, if there's any hope for this team, someone has to come in and figure out a way to move on from some of these big contracts.
Sure, absolutely. That's what I was tweeting yesterday. You've got to at least trade one of their young players with a super long contract, besides trying to get rid of Hayes and get rid of some other players. But the idea is you're going to now bring in Briere and ask him to do all of these things and make trades. And he's going to need help. Who's running Lehigh? Nobody is running Lehigh. I think he needs to run Lehigh first before he could just start running the big club, to be honest.
He's been with the organization for how long now? 4.5 years?
Right.
In various roles. It might be longer than that. I mean,
has he been in the right role?
He knows all of the people, right?
All the people there, and he knows the players, but he's not actually running Lehigh. And that's a big thing. And also, is Danny going to make changes in the player development department, or is he going to leave those guys that he knows? Because leaving them all there is not going to solve the problem either. And just adding others won't solve it either. There are some changes that need to be made from within, and he's going to have to do that. Will he do that?
I don't know, but he would potentially do it faster than somebody who doesn't know the players, and not just the players on the ice, but the players in the organization. Like Briere, as in his role as whatever it is, assistant GM or special assistant to the GM, he presumably has been in all the meetings. He knows all of the guys in the front office. He may have an idea of what needs to be done. Like, he can achieve change faster than someone who comes in who doesn't know anything about the situation.
Not necessarily. Like, if you bring in someone, remember, if I'm looking for a prospective job, I'm looking at other clubs that I think I could work for, and I'm already doing my own homework. And there are people out there doing that, guys who are in positions that would like to be in positions. So guys are doing their homework. So I wouldn't be that concerned about that. I get what you're saying, but again, that's another reason why you could bring somebody in to work with Danny, even if you make him co-GM or something like that. Because again, he hasn't been a GM anywhere. Like, you're taking now a risk where if he didn't work out, let's say he was struggling, then the franchise is set back like 5 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have that. Chef, I'll get to you in a second. I just want to mention, I mean, there's guys out there, you saw what Zito did when he went to Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, he had experience, and he was able to jump right on it. He probably had been studying what was going on in Florida for a while, and was able to get in and make the kind of moves that he did. And they had such
13 moves or something.
Yeah, he knew exactly what to do, but he had the requisite experience. We were talking about guys like Mark Iannetti, Mike Buda. I mean, the guys have really been high-level executives that could groom Danny
Mhm.
to get to the point where he would be ready. But I mean, I see where Darren's coming from. Chef, you go ahead.
Well, I want to say, me and Dan weren't on the last episode you had with Shane, but it was quite possibly one of the best episodes I've enjoyed from our show in a long time. And I think that Shane had like the perfect recipe of what to do. I mean, and you just said it too, Russ. I think he needs to go to Lehigh. I think he needs to stay in Lehigh for at least 2 years, and that don't underestimate the fact that that mentor relationship that he was talking about. When I was a chef, I didn't go to school. I didn't have the money for that. But what I did is I apprenticed with somebody for 9.5 years.
Mhm.
And then when he finally said, Brendan, you got to go. You got to be your own man now. So he kicked me out of the nest. And what ended up happening was I didn't even know half the stuff I knew. I didn't know that I knew it all, as much
Right.
as I did, because it was the second hand. It's the way we did things. It's the way you do things. And I think if they can get somebody on the outside, I know he floated a couple names that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but I think their ideal situation is gets at somebody who's going to be out there in that ether out there, and grab somebody that's going to be in charge of the main club. Let Danny have that. So Danny's 5 years, 6 years down the line where he's AGM. Maybe he gets bumped up, but he has that person with him, working with him in Lehigh, that's his assistant, that he can work back and forth. And then those two come together when the situation warrants it.
Sure, that's ideal. I don't think they're going to do that. But I would say if Danny spent a year in Lehigh and
Okay.
really, helped to change things down there, I think that would be good, because that other person you bring in, again, could go to a different spot in the organization after Danny takes over as GM. This other person could be in charge of hockey ops, because
Yeah.
again, you're talking about Chuck just probably being the president, because that's his other dual title. We also have to remember, and Dan could chime in on this, Danny's learning from Chuck Fletcher.
Oh,
I
not
mean,
necessarily.
that's who he's learning from.
I mean, based on what you think that he's going to come in and want to do everything like Chuck Fletcher? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Okay.
but just like Chef said, when you get mentored along the way, you would like the next mentor to be somebody better than Chuck Fletcher. Even if
maybe he's sitting in these meetings thinking to himself, I can't believe this guy is doing this. I can't wait until I have control and I can do things differently.
I think there's a little bit of that, but I think there's also, as an example, like, the names you brought up, Yannetti, I know really well, Fuda, same thing. But even if you brought in someone like Scotty Bowman and said, hey, Scotty, sit in for a year and help Danny out, there are a million things he could learn from Scotty Bowman that he probably has no idea about, front office wise or otherwise. And Scotty, even at his age, could look at the team and easily tell you what's good and what's bad. I know the Flyers are relying on some of their older guys for that, but they're not Scotty Bowman. They don't have Scotty Bowman's brain. They're not as successful as he was. And I'm saying you can get somebody younger than that too, but I'm just giving you an example of him, because if you think that Stan Bowman was doing everything in Chicago, he wasn't. He was doing, he was learning from his dad, and his dad was the best possible teacher. I just don't think Danny's had the best possible teachers.
See, the way I kind of view it is that I think John Tortorella is basically sort of in a GM advisor role with anyone who comes in, because he has so much control over the future of this franchise that I would almost say that if you name Briere GM, he's going to be working hand in hand with Tortorella on a lot of this stuff.
That's fair. And I think to some degree you would get some success, but again, Torts does write off players. He could tell you whatever he wants. He could say, I mean, again, look how Marian Gaborik left and won a cup elsewhere. Like, you're going to lose some talent if you do everything just for Torts. And that's where it's better to have a GM that sometimes says no to that coach, because he says, I get what you're saying, but that's not in the best interest of long-term interest of this club, because Torts is not really looking at the long-term interest of this club. He might not even be looking 2 years down the road, because that's the way he is. So if nothing else, somebody has to look 5 years down the road besides Dan Briere. Somebody has to look 5 years down the road, because when you're drafting this year, that's when these guys are going to start to make an impact. So
Yeah.
somebody has to look that. Torts is not going to care about that.
I think he does.
Uh,
Everything that I see that what Torts is talking about and the way that he's dealing with players and how he's trying to turn Noah Cates into a center and how he's benching Kevin Hayes, I think he's trying to instill all of the habits in these players where, like, he was the guy. We had Chuck Fletcher calling it a retool in the offseason. Tortorella was the only guy in the front office that was basically saying, we're not, I'm not even expecting to make the playoffs. Like, everything
that's true.
Everything that Tortorella has done makes me think that he wants to be part of a long-term winning culture here. Like, I have no reason not to think that's true. And also Tortorella, and almost everywhere he's gone, has spent a long period of time.
And he is teaching this year, but how long do you think he really wants to teach for? Because he you could tell at times he does not want to teach. And he, I think, has to do it this year because he knows he has to do it this year. I'm not sure he wants to teach next year. I'm not sure of that at all.
I think I don't know. I don't think he thinks that they're going to be a cup contender next year.
No. He doesn't think that, but he's going to certainly, the guys he worked on this year, certainly going to, get them to a certain level, and 2 or 3 of them have, like you pointed out, and you're right. But again, if they're going to try and infuse more young talent, he's probably going to do the same thing he did this year and send them up and down, and then hope it works out in Lehigh. And it did for Cam, because Cam York is a really great player. But that doesn't work that way for everybody. And Cates got trained in Minnesota Duluth. Torts didn't have to do much for Noah Cates. Let's be fair. He just didn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just, Shep, before you go, look, you want to model success. The Flyers don't have anyone who has really been successful who's come in from the outside. We're hoping that Ron Hextall is that guy. And I could have that discussion and maybe another time. We didn't get the job done one way or another.
Right.
And I think they need someone who at least has that kind of credibility or cachet and more, with more experience.
I mean, all you have to do is look at the Phillies with Dave Dombrowski. I mean, you knew he would empty out the farm system to some degree, but you also knew he's got a track record of success. They need somebody with a track record of success, whether that guy's going to be the GM, assistant GM, something in a position of power, and if nothing else, to help mentor Briere. But you need that person. If you don't have that person, where is the roadmap? You're hoping, but that helps you do it faster. It does.
Absolutely. Chef?
I was going to say, to Russ's point, I think there is some truth into him not wanting to be a teacher next year. I think he's looking at his young core guys, and if you went through his list of what I think it was Charlie Connor broke it down of how he kind of like graded everybody. Mm-hmm. And if you go through that list, he does have his favorites, and there's players there he really likes. Mm-hmm. And I think if he can instill that level of play with those players, and then in the offseason either make, or in the trade deadline, make the trades with players in mind that he could just sit there, I think he makes the moves to get players that will fit into his system, his program, his way of doing things. And then next year, it's not necessarily teaching so much as it is fine-tuning some of the other players that might be coming into the picture. And he's already instilled that work ethic and his program into what's left already. And I think you'll see a movement on a lot of the older guys out of here. And I think it just makes it easier for him to transition into year 2 and possibly beyond.
I mean, there's some truth to that, but again, there's going to be a lot of teaching that has to go with Tyson Forster, and there's 3 or 4 players like that. I mean, right now Zamula is good enough to be on the team. Why isn't he on the team? Give me a reason.
Yeah, it can't exactly.
He's better than Nick Seeler. Why isn't he there? Because Torts likes Nick Seeler, because Nick Seeler is physical.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's going to be those situations, and that's why it's like, if you have a GM or at least a group, of people that can talk to him and say, we see your side, now look at our side. Sometimes you can get him to bend a little bit. And I think you're going to have to do that, because you don't want a team full of muckers. He even said he loves what Konecny's doing. He's put him out in all situations, but he did also say if we were a winning team, he would have to reel that in, like on that turnover yesterday. He started it. Risto made it worse. And, And that's the thing. You start looking at that, and so even Torts knows, hey, this is great. I got him his engine going again, and he's playing way better. But there's still, things I have to work on him if we're a very successful team. So that's a whole other thing. I mean, again, if you're a very successful team, do you want Zach McEwen on it?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Sealer didn't play yesterday, by the way.
No, I know, but I'm just saying in general.
I'm,
He does still play.
He's got 3 spots on left D. He's got Provorov, he's got Sanheim, and he's got York now. Where's Zamula playing?
Maybe, all right, fine. This moment because of York, that's fine. But I also said, is Travis Sanheim really working out with John Tortorella? No, I might try and trade him. He's got to play while you're trying, but
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just saying right now, I'm just explaining why I don't think Zamula's in the lineup right now.
No, that's fine. But again, if he was going to run I guess he's not going to run a true rotation. So that's fine. That's a fair point.
Yeah. Well, I also think that the Flyers need to do a better job of training left-handed guys to play their offside, so they don't
that's
make
a whole
silly.
other.
Just silly.
And Torts has done that.
Yeah, and I think it's something they need to do and prioritize as an organization, so you don't fall in love with handedness to the point you sign Rasmus Ristolainen to even trade for him in the first place, let alone re-sign him.
Well, and that's something where hopefully when they move Braun at the deadline, maybe they'll try and work on Zamula or York or someone else to play the right side, right?
Yeah.
It's gotta happen.
Would you give up Frost and part of the deal if somebody would take Ristolainen off your hands?
Well, why am I trading Ristolainen? Like, the coach actually is acknowledging that he's okay with his play, and he said maybe they're not a top pairing, but he likes what he's doing with Provorov. I'm not trading him. So no, I'm not trading Frost either. I mean, again, we have to remember Frost is doing what he's doing even at a slow rate now at the first line center position. So that the matchups are much tougher. If you had him as a second line center, I think he would be scoring a little more.
Yeah,
he's got more confidence.
Hey, he's definitely been a bright spot in the last 4 games.
Yeah, one thing on Frost before we head over to the WJC, and it's just a comment about Chuck Fletcher. The play he made along the boards, I don't know if it was in the third period, where he lost the board battle, but then he almost did like a pirouette and cut the play and stopped the play right there and freed the puck for another sequence of offensive attack. He doesn't do that a year ago.
No.
And that's because he's sticking with it. He's more physical and he has that mindset. And I got to give John Tortorella.
Well, even the goal that he scored, what I tweeted was he slowed down the play. Like he slowed down, he was decisive, and he made sure he got the shot where he wanted it to instead of rushing it. And Torts talked about him rushing it, just getting rid of it, but he was also rushing it, just shooting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love kind of like the way that Frost has developed this year, because I think that for a long time he was really concentrating on the defensive side. And I mean, I was watching, I'm watching him closely on every single one of his shifts. He's playing very good defensively.
He is
like extremely good.
For weeks. That's been for weeks. Yeah.
For weeks, taking short shifts, like intentionally taking short shifts, playing good defensively. And now he's finally, you can see he's getting a little more confident. Now, again, we're talking about games against Arizona and Columbus. However, like the goal he scored last night, he kind of floated back to the point to give the defenseman a great spot to sort of saucer him a pass.
Yeah.
And then he just spun and skated in and scored. I think there's still going to be ups and downs with him. And I still don't know, what his ultimate NHL upside is. But my belief is still that he has a skill set that no one else on this team has. Whether or not he's going to unlock it.
Well, it's true. I think it's true.
Yeah, and whether or not he's going to unlock it completely at the NHL level, I think is still sort of up for debate. I think on the power play, he'll definitely be able to unlock it. But I wouldn't move him. I feel like with Ristolainen, if they want to move him, maybe they could find a way to do it without having to give up a guy like Frost. But
yeah, I would never do that for sure. But the other thing that I wanted to point out was I think John has to change a little too. He hasn't been in this game the entire time. He's certainly, got to watch at ESPN and he's a good coach. Nobody's going to deny that. But like with D'Angelo, he played a really great defensive game last night. But, Torts thinks when he gets better at defense, his offense is going to get better. And I don't believe that in D'Angelo, having watched him his whole career, because he's, an offense first guy no matter what. Even if he plays better defense, he's going to have to work twice as hard to play better defense, and it's definitely going to take away points from his offense. I mean, he's already having one of his worst offensive years as a defenseman in the last few years. So I think he has to sort of ease up a little bit on guys like D'Angelo to get more out of them. And that's where I feel like he could learn something even from an outside voice. If someone said something to Tor, it's like, hey, because again, I don't think he has it all figured out. I don't, because otherwise I think he'd have won more championships too.
Mm-hmm. That's a point to ponder. That's for sure. Just before we go from this subject and the Flyers, I think if Chuck Fletcher remains with hockey operations in any capacity when a change is made, inevitably, I think it's kind of like a clown show. I think it's amateurish, and it speaks to what this organization's going through for the last decade.
He wouldn't be hockey ops, Isaiah. He'd just be a president. So in other words, he puts on a good face. If they really wanted to do what a strict president used to do, it would just be business operations.
Yes, that's I could deal with that.
Right, but it wouldn't be just that. But he's a known face. He's a likable guy. So they get him to go out there to talk about the Flyers Wives Carnival. They get him to talk about some business venture that the Flyers are doing with, I don't know, 1-800-mattress, whatever. I'm just giving you. And these are the kinds of things you have Chuck Fletcher do. He's no longer sitting in on the hockey ops meetings.
Right, and watching like Howie Roseman those couple of years with Chip Kelly. He's taking care of the Band-Aids and the medical cabinet. That's fine. I'm fine with that.
That's what I envision. Whether
I hope
happens,
regardless of what happens, if Fletcher is still here, I hope that's the capacity that he is. So, gents, let's move along, because up in the maritime provinces of Canada, of Halifax and Moncton, they're resuming a regular schedule for the World Junior Championships. It's already exciting in the pre-tournament games. And Russ, you're uniquely qualified. You've covered these kids all year round. And I just wanted to talk about, who are the favorites, who are some of the draft eligibles as the Flyers stumble through this season that we want to look at in this tournament. And let's talk about Cutter Gauthier and what you've seen so far with him. So wherever you want to begin with the WJC.
Well, we'll start with Gauthier. He had a really good game. I noticed they put him on left wing. I don't think they're going to put him at center, because I feel like there's so many options for center. And since he's still new at the position, left wing makes sense. Look, him and Snuggerud are magic. I mean, Snuggerud's a really good player. They're both two big guys who have finesse in their game and shots and everything else. So that's only going to fuel Gauthier more. So that's really good news. That's good to see. As far as other Flyers, Zanetti will have a big role with the Swiss. I've liked what I've seen out of him. I mean, he's not going to be a big offensive defenseman. He's got some offense in his game, but he is physical and he is playing pretty good defense, and he's a good puck mover. So that's, I'm going to be watching him too, to kind of see what this tournament, does for him. We can start with the U.S. team. They're a good team. I don't think they're a super team. I think their defense is probably the most mobile I've ever seen them, but it's also the smallest defense we've ever seen them with too. I mean, they're only guys of note that are big are Luke Hughes and Chesley, and those guys could be out there, sure. Late in games, PK, for those moments, and then let the guys do the other stuff, because Lane Hudson, he's a dynamic guy and he can really open things up for them. And so could Hughes. But again, Hughes is the whole package. But
tremendous player.
Yeah, he's the best guy they have on the blue line. But again, Seamus Casey is very underrated. He's a guy that can really make a lot of things happen. Behrens too. Behrens has tremendous offensive acumen, even though he's not like a super skater. He thinks the game really fast, knows what to do. They've got talented guys. I like Ufko and Pert a lot. Middlestat, he's the guy I like the least, and it has nothing to do with his brother or anything. I've seen him play in the USHL, and I just felt like, yeah, he's a good skater. There's offense in his game. I don't love his all-around game, but it won't matter.
Can he do chin-ups?
Yeah, I'm sure he can. I'm sure he learned that lesson. But the defense is more mobile than I've ever seen it, so that's good. The offense, yeah, they are loaded, and and they have some guys that also can play a little bit and can hit you, like Tyler Boucher, who I am a fan of. I like him a lot as a person and as a player. There's some interesting storylines I put on sportsology.com. Sam Lipkin is a junior Flyer, and him and Kenny Connors were teammates on the junior Flyers, and now they're teammates on Team USA. I doubt that's ever happened before for the junior Flyer program. So, that's nice. Lipkin was 223rd overall. There were only 224 picks. This is one where I had said the Coyotes got a pick so they could pick Lipkin because they were surprised he was still in the draft. And, again, this is like where I look at a team like the Flyers who could always use an extra player. And this is a guy in your own backyard. I learned something a long time ago in business when I was like a district manager for like a software company. And what he always taught us was go see what your competition is doing, go see what's in your own backyard. And it doesn't seem like the Flyers ever take advantage of guys who are playing in their own backyard. And, and I'm not saying Lipkin's going to be a star, but I'm saying he's a pretty good player. And so is Connors. And these are two guys that, they didn't go deep in they didn't go early in the draft. Connors was 4th round. Lipkin was, the 7th round. So, you look at that and you say, So, but I do like the storyline of that. So that's something I'm watching for. As far as, Calvin Brindley, I wrote about for Elite Prospects. Great guy, smaller guy, but he's already having an impact. He could play make, he could score. He's a fun guy to watch. I know Jackson Blake will get a lot of press because of his dad, but he's a good player too. But they do have a good mix of big finesse guys who could punch in the mouth and still score. Strammel is a guy who is a big horse and really understands the game well. And they have him at like 4th line center.
Draft eligible too.
And he's at Wisconsin. I saw him play in the All-American Prospects game. Like it may even be 3 years ago. This is a guy that's played up in age his entire like amateur career. So he is used to playing against the older guys because he's a bigger guy and he knows how to play big and he has a great shot. It's good to have players like that. So I think the U.S. is, in the top 3 for sure. I don't know if they're winning the gold medal. Like I'll just cut to the chase on that. Canada's loaded. Like and Canada doesn't have the greatest goaltending, but do they really need it? Like that's really the question I guess I would have to ask out loud. I don't know if they really need it. And, again, you've got guys like Bedard. Logan Stankoven is somebody who Anthony Mingione, who I do Off the Post with, wanted to draft. And I think he went in the 2nd round, the same as Forster, if I remember. Maybe he went in the second
round, yeah.
He did. He really wanted to get him, even though he was a little smaller, like 5'10" or 5'11", but, he's built like a, I don't know if I could say it on the show.
I know what you're going to say. A brick hit house.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he really is like that. And he's hard to cover as a result. So he's one of those guys that I really do like. And I think is going to be, really good for Canada. Obviously Bedard. Fantilli is a guy who's very special. As great as Bedard is, there are times that Fantilli can make him even better on the power play, especially. I interviewed Fantilli early in the year for Elite Prospects, and he just blew me away as far as how mature he was, how he has everything laid out, how he knows that going to the college route was the better route than the. I think he was an OHL drafted guy. Was it OHL, WHL? I can't remember, but it may have been OHL. But either way, Canadian Hockey League. He didn't want to go there because he knew he'd be there 4 years. He said, his brother was in college. He could play with his brother. He'd rather go there, stay there for a couple of years. So he's not coming out after his first year. He's going back, which is what I suggest for Gauthier too. As much as he might want to come out, I want him to perfect the center position. And knowing how Torts is, if he's not playing perfect center when he comes out for that, the ELC tryout, he's not going to be playing for the Flyers next year anyhow. So I think better for him to play in Michigan for the 2 years, really perfect that center position. But again, that's, those kinds of things. Going to Michigan is a good thing for Fantilli. This kid is smart. He's got a great shot. He plays a 2-way game. He can play physical. He's super, super competitive. So really a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, Dan.
So it's, and Russ can attest. The World Juniors is like, it's so much fun watching these young hockey players. It's like where I remember watching Sidney Crosby there as a 16-year-old and McDavid as a 17-year-old. And it's so much fun. And so, as a Flyers fan, here, like if you're watching and you don't really know a lot of the guys, like here's what I would suggest. Like, so on the US, definitely you want to watch Cutter Gauthier. I mean, he's really the only Flyers affiliated guy in this tournament that, you know, has much of a chance at a big NHL future. And what I would watch with him is, so as Russ mentioned, he plays on the top US line with Logan Cooley, who's probably their best player, and Jimmy Snuggerud, who the Blues took later in the first round, and who's really developed. Everyone knows that Cutter Gauthier's got an incredible shot. You know, he's got a great one-timer. He can wing wrist shots from the wing. The Flyers are going to want to turn him into a center. So I would be, you know, he made some really good plays today in the pre-tourney game where he kind of, with speed, took the puck from the center of the ice around the wing, around the net, set up a guy with a nice shot sort of from the face-off dot. Like, I'd be looking to see what kind of complete game he's got. I want to see how his speed holds up with some of these players, because that's going to be important if he wants to be an NHL center. But I would, you know, focus on Gauthier there. And then in terms of the Flyers' possible draft picks, you know, the Flyers probably will pick anywhere between 1 to 7 in this upcoming draft. So some of the guys to watch are, obviously, as Russ talked about on Canada, Connor Bedard is probably going to go number 1. He has an elite skill set. Fantilli is more of a prototypical, like, big NHL power forward, but he's also very skilled. And then the other guys to watch for are on Sweden, there's a guy named Leo Carlson, who is probably going to go 3rd or 4th. Michkov has kind of been trailing off a little bit. He's been having a little bit of struggles this year. So there's some talk that Leo Carlson, who NHL teams are going to try and make him a center. He's actually playing the wing this year in the SHL, but he's kind of like Fantilli. He's a big, strong player, kind of cut out of the Anton Lundell, Barkov type of mold. Big, strong forward. So he's a guy that if the Flyers draft 3rd or 4th, Leo Carlson is definitely going to be on the radar. And one guy
Craig Button thinks he could play center. We had him on our show, and he thinks he could play center. So
and so the other guy that I would watch, if you're a Flyers fan, if you watch any games of Slovakia, they've got a big forward named Dalibor Dvorsky, who people have going anywhere from 5 to 10, and he's really a complete NHL forward. He makes all the little plays, and he's a guy that could end up, you know, being in the Flyers range. So those 4 guys are the ones I would really look for if you're trying to see, okay, who could the Flyers draft? And then obviously keep an eye on Cutter Gauthier. But as a Flyers fan, that's how I would kind of be watching.
Those are good guys, and I like Dvorsky a lot. And I've got a few other draft eligibles I have on the list too. I'll talk about.
Sure.
Now, I mean, Flyers definitely have learned from the Russian situation. Do you think that's going to play into a lot of these younger Russian players because of obviously the war going on right now, the fact that, you know, what happened with players getting held and such as, so do you think you could see some of these Russian players drop down out of maybe even out of the first round?
No, not
that far. No,
but I could see him. But I could see him dropping out of the top 5 picks. Yeah. Because I mean, if you know, like Dan says, anybody could take a bet on when Sean Couturier is out. If you asked me to take a bet, would the Flyers draft Michkov if they were drafting 4th, and like let's say Carlson was there and Dvorsky, I'd say they'd pass on him. So, you know, and I think there's other teams too. I'm not just pinning that on them. I think there's other teams too.
That's what I meant in general. Yeah. I mean, I think they drop a little bit. I don't know out in the first round, but I know. Yeah.
No, they'll drop a little bit. They'll drop a little bit. Some other good players to watch. Axel Sandin Palika, I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, when I was at the the 5 Nations. Really good skater, smart kid. He is young, so he's not going to have a massive point impact, I don't think. He did have a really good point impact at the 5 Nations, but here, you know, it's a 19-year-old tournament, so he's playing up.
Is he arguably one of the best defensemen in the draft this year?
Yeah, I want to say he's 2nd or 3rd. I think he's right in there because, you know, he's already got a good frame. He's smart. He skates well. He's already playing at a high level, and he can go. I think he can go higher. He really does have a great motor, and he really he really when he's rushing the puck up the ice to get into the offensive zone, it's quick and robotic and good. Like he knows he's very good on the fly as far as making decisions. So I'm really high on him. And after I spoke to him, I was like, wow, this kid has it together. Edward Saleh is a really good guy to watch for Czechia. I don't think the Flyers would draft him at that spot if they were 4 or 5. I wouldn't, but he's really good offensive player. But there's good and bad in his game, so he'll be a fun guy to watch. He's a guy that I don't really want to say where he's going to go until after this tournament because I want to see more of him. Dan mentioned Carlson. I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a guy who's undrafted, Werner Miettinen. Late in this draft, I watched him play. I think it was for Fargo in the USHL, and he's like a third line center there. He's got a quick shot. He's good on the power play. He may not be a center in the NHL, but really good all around game for a guy who's undrafted. So you got to watch these undrafted guys too, because they're a lot of times they make good late round picks. Strammel's this year's draft, and Strammel I would take anywhere, top 12, because he's got size, he's got a great shot, he's smart, he's at a good program. And so I just feel like there's a lot of upside with him being a power forward. He's been a power forward his whole career. He can skate. So I don't think it's a situation where he's taking advantage of just his size when he's playing up in age. So, and that's the other thing. He's just so used to playing up in age. I feel like it's just second nature to him. There's some pretty good goalies. And Barrico for the U.S. is good. He might be their best goalie. He plays the puck well. He's good clears, good glove. I've seen him play. I like both of them. Augustine's too is good too, but I think Mbarico ends up being the guy who gets the first real shot. But neither of them are like super duper stars or anything like that. Also, I'm going to say it's Koskenvu Aku, who's playing at Harvard. Really good goalie. He's big and athletic. He's Finnish. He swallows up pucks. He's quick side to side. So, that's another guy to watch. I believe he is draft eligible, but I didn't put it on my notes. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. That's a good list of them. And I'm just trying to see who else to watch. On Team Canada, it's easy to say to watch the stars, but there are some guys that I liked in the draft that have really done well so far. I got to get to their roster. Hold on.
Sure.
I like Zach Dean a lot, and I don't think Zach Dean gets a lot of credit. I think he plays in Gatineau, so he gets a certain amount of credit, right? He's on Team Canada, but compared to the other guys on the team, he's just got a lot of good traits. I looked at him as a guy that maybe the Flyers would look at, but it didn't happen for him. Reed Schaefer, a really good power forward. Like, this is a guy that's fun to watch. He's a guy that's in the crease. He played in the AJHL. And he burnt up that league. I'm a big fan of Brant Clark. I wrote about him on Sportsology. Ran into him at the rookie photo shoot, and he got bigger, he got stronger. He's still really fast. He's got a great brain. Owen Zellweger, really big fan of playing the right side. He's smart. So there's even though these aren't guys the Flyers could get, you should always watch, because I always say you never know if you're going to get them in a trade. That's.
Yeah, that's true. And just before we get to Dan, any of the teams that are battling to stay out of relegation, like Latvia, Austria, have any players that are draft eligible worth, like Finenko from Latvia or David Reinbacher? Any of those guys going to move the needle at all?
I did move one of my lists here, and I had an Austrian. I got to get it back here. That's the question. Hold on. Let's see if my computer can pull it up, because I had one from last year, and Ian Scherzer from Austria is a 2023 guy. He's a center. I didn't look to see if he was on the team, but he was on the team last year, so I'm assuming. But he's the thing. He can make some plays in time and space. He's got some good dekes. He played in Sweden. So that's another guy. That's an Austrian for you. So I did have that. I just didn't have it like right at the fingertips there, but I have some good files, so I'm doing my best.
No, you get a whole wealth of them. So Dan, let me turn to you and get your question there.
It's not a World Junior question, but it's a question for Russ, since we've got him on. I feel resigned to the fact that the Flyers are most likely going to be picking between 5 and 7. There's two guys in the WHL that I kind of wanted to get Russ's opinion on, if he's higher on one of them or the other. There's a kid who's really risen up the ranks this year named Andrew Cristal, who's plays for Kelowna and is scoring at an almost 2-point-a-game pace. Apparently just offense just exudes out of him, amazing skills. and then another kid in WHL for Winnipeg named Zach Benson. They're both
Yeah.
forwards who are very highly thought of, and they're both guys who would probably be considerations for the Flyers if they're picking between 5 and 7. I'm just curious your thoughts on those two guys.
I mean, Chris Stahl is a good player. I do need to see a little more, but certainly everything that I even hear from other people is great. I'm big on Benson. I would just take Benson because I think he is a cut above. Now, again, a little bit smaller guy at like 5'10", but man, he is so smart. The way he could get into the offensive zone. He's terrific offensively. He's a good two-way player. He thinks the game quickly. He's kind of like a coach on the ice. I wrote about him last year for Elite Prospects, or maybe over the summer. And, there was a point where his team had to move for like the last 2 weeks of the year because something happened at the building, whatever. Didn't matter, had a great playoffs. Now, I'm a big Zach Benson guy. I would have no hesitation taking him.
Right.
You think he's a guy that if Michkov slides, that Benson could be one of the guys that, let's say the draft goes, Bedard, Fantilli, Carlson. You think that Benson's a guy that people could think about at 4 over Michkov?
I don't know. I think a lot of draft guys would probably say, I don't know about a 4 because, I think Benson's speed's pretty good. I think it's up in the air for some. But man, he just has the desire to be a great hockey player. I wouldn't have any hesitation in it. But I think some others would, because I think there's little things that you can nitpick about his game. But man, I like those kind of guys that are almost like another coach on the ice and they help you out. And he's just, I'm even looking back at, some of the quotes he gave me. So here's one thing he talked about, that he takes pride in his defensive game. He watches a lot of video about it. It's extremely important. It's a huge tool at the next level. So like he already knows that. Ever since I was little, I'd love to play off the rush, create off the rush, and play with lots of speed. And, for where he's playing, he has lots of speed. I think he's good. He's speedy. He probably can get a little better. But even this, I don't like shooting when there's not an open lane. So getting my shots off quick and creating rebounds for my teammates is something I take a lot of pride in. Like he is a hardworking, always thinking kind of guy. And he used Braden Point as one of his mentors. McDavid, forget about that. But he used Braden Point, and I thought, yeah, you know what? Braden Point, I even didn't give Braden Point enough respect compared to what he is now. When I was at an event once and was interviewing him, and I was treating him like I knew he'd be a good player. I didn't know he was going to be a star player. But I do think Benson could reach something close to Braden Point, something close to it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's usually when you look at a tournament like this, and traditionally it's been Canada, U.S., Finland, Sweden. So you have a medal pick?
I do. I knew you guys were going to pin me into this corner, and I'm going to be really honest. Like, I'm an honest guy with you guys. Well, I'm an honest guy with most everybody. But I'm really honest with you guys, and I was going back and forth. Like, I just kept moving around the deck chairs. But what I finished on was Canada, Finland, USA, Sweden. I got to think with Kemmel and Brad Lambert that Finland can really have something that a lot of the other teams don't, even though Sweden's got Lekaramaki, a lot of players I like, Rosen, but I just feel like maybe it's the Finns that are just going to play their usual Finn game. I think the U.S. could go second, but right now I'm going to put the U.S. third because I just kind of wonder if they'll figure out how to Shane Malloy put it in my head now because, we talk every day. And he put it in my head that maybe if you're playing a big cycle game that you could cause problems for the smaller defensemen on Team USA. And I do think there's something to that. And I do kind of wonder, like, they're never going to show that in one of the early games, right? You're never going to see that. But that is something, to worry about. So I'm going to say U.S. third, Finland second, Sweden four.
Right.
We miss Russia. Like, I don't want that to say, like, I am pro-Putin. I am not. But I miss the competition of Russia.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that Russia's not there.
Yeah.
I would go with Canada over the U.S. I think the real difference, aside from Bedard, is going to be their defense is so good And they're I've been watching the game tonight. They look a little sloppy, but they've just got these 3 elite offensive defensemen with Zellweger and Kevin Korchinski, and Brant Clark. And those 3 guys are just so dynamic from the blue line out.
Yeah.
I feel like at some point they're all going to kind of click, and that team is just so scary.
And isn't Canada always sloppy in the early games anyhow? Like they are.
Very sloppy. And Logan Stankoven is one of my favorite young players to watch because, as you mentioned, he's kind of like a bowling ball, but his puck control is so good.
It is.
And he almost reminds me a little bit of Braden Point, except he's a little more physical and not quite as fast a skater.
No.
But I just love watching him play. He's like a bowling ball out there.
Yeah.
With the puck.
He is. No, he's great. I mean, that's, again, I love the tournament, and Craig Button had said it on Off the Post. You love it because everybody just gives their all on every shift because their country means so much to them, and they don't want to let anybody down. And it's not to say, that doesn't happen in the Stanley Cup or anything, but I have to tell you, I've covered probably 4 or 5 World Juniors, and I've watched a ton. Honestly, I mean, this country would have gotten hooked on it much earlier had someone ever shown it to anybody. Thankfully, NHL Network started to do it maybe a decade ago. Was that about right?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, but then they started with just the U.S. games, right? Like it needed, but now they've gotten in step with it. But it's just it's hard to explain the energy. But like I've had guys tell me, like from other countries, yeah, I took a run at that guy. I did. Like the first one I covered. There was a player from maybe it was Finland or something, and he said, "Oh no, actually, I think it was maybe it may have been like Slovakia or something." But he said, "Yeah, I took a run at that guy. I absolutely did." And you're not going to get that in like World Championships. Definitely not. It's not that competitive, and you won't even get that a lot in Stanley Cup playoffs. Like guys won't admit that. So there's things that get admitted. There's things that I love the hype. When I covered I think it was the 06 one in Vancouver, that was my first one. And the hype of like Phil Kessel and Crosby and everything else was just unbelievable. Malkin, so that, I love the hype of that and what guys could turn into, because a lot of times, like Dan's saying, he's watching. We don't always get to see a lot of junior action. So a lot of times here in this country, you're going to go back to what a guy did in the World Juniors. Like if you see him 3 years down the line, you really like him as a player. You're going to be like, I saw him in the World Juniors and he looked really good. So it really is a great point of reference too.
Yeah. A lot of guys use this as a launching point or a turning point in their draft year and kind of take that momentum. And some other guys have to talk it down as if like they were a little bit of a letdown. So there's that kind of like
I always feel bad about that. Like sometimes guys, like it's almost like you can't be happy winning a silver. And you saw, what the Rangers prospect did with that when he threw his silver medal, was it Elias Anderson, and then had to go retrieve it. But they are happy they won a silver. Don't kid yourself. But publicly, it's almost like they can't. And Canada, you can't. Like if you don't get a gold, like Canada has to just like sort of like they just have to all grit their teeth when they're on the line. But I will say this: the IIHF has gotten better at their gifts. They used to give these guys shavers. Like half of them can't even shave. So at least they've done a little better than that.
Yeah. Yeah, Canada is almost like the U.S. Olympic basketball team in '72. Yes. They don't get that, but that they're right to this day. That was the biggest ripoff I've ever seen in sports. So.
Oh no, the '72 Olympics when I was 9 years old, the Russians with the shot clock against the U.S.
Yes, that's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
That's the worst thing I've seen in my life.
Yes, absolutely.
As far as fudging it.
Total ripoff. Yeah. USA won the gold, and that's it. They ripped them off. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Russ, fantastic. So what's your final thoughts? What do you want to tell people where you're going to be coming up and on social media?
Okay. So at Sportsology on Twitter for as long as Twitter lasts. Apparently they have a $1.4 billion debt bill coming, and we'll see if they can get past that. I also have a new old book out, the Winter Classic book. Of course, the Winter Classic's coming up. First time in a digital format. So that's out in digital now, up on Amazon. Folks can get that. I will be at Fenway, so I'm happy about that. My second time at Fenway. First time was great. The Flyers played there. A lot of great memories from that. So can't wait for that. just, at Sportsology, Elite Prospects, Full Press is another site I write for. I'll put my World Junior stuff up on there and do some baseball there. So, yeah, going to stay busy. Going to be, still covering Flyers games. But yeah, I'm looking forward. I'll be honest. I'm looking ahead to the Winter Classic at this point after the World Juniors. I love the World Juniors.
Right.
Well, during still.
Yeah, I mean, you are Mr. Ubiquity. There's no doubt about that. Russ, thanks so much for stopping on, and people can follow you at Sportsology and sportsology.com. You take care now.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yep.
See you, Dan. See you, Chef.
Enjoy it. Yep.
All right. Chef, you wanted to chime in.
I know, just giving a thumbs up to Russ. I thought it was great. I loved everything. I like it when we delve into these off the cuff stuff. I think seeing the kids playing is probably one of the exciting things, because you're looking at them and you look at their faces. It's not a job yet for them. It's still fun, and you can see that excitement in their eyes and all that. And I think it's really important that these young players they get that experience going to the championships like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention when Russ was on, we had Shane on last week, and he mentioned that Cutter Gauthier's first position was actually center.
Yes.
And he does have a history of playing center. He's not a newbie at that position, and he just volunteered to play left wing. Was it when he went to the USHL or something like that? So he does have. It's not like he's starting totally from scratch for whatever that is worth. But
he certainly he could become a center. I mean, people should watch the World Juniors, and probably a lot of Flyers fans haven't got to see him play that much. So watch his game and see what you think. He's a very good player. Whether or not they should have taken him over David Jiricek at number 5, we'll find out more over the years. But he's a very good player. So, yeah,
there's no doubt about that. Dan, any final thoughts before we depart for tonight?
No, I just, like I said, the Flyers the rest of the year, I'm just going to be watching how these kind of young kids develop, and I want to see what happens with the Hayes situation. If he keeps playing like he did against Columbus, it's going to come to a head. Something's going to happen.
Yeah. And who's going to make that decision? That's something else. For me, that's the next big event. Who's going to make the decision on the trade deadline or anything could happen with Hayes, although I think Hayes is going to wait till the offseason unless this thing really deteriorates. So with that, we want to wish everybody a great holiday, a great Christmas. Hanukkah's happening right now. Happy Hanukkah, Dan. We'll probably, and barring some big earth-shattering news, are not going to be back before the first of the year. So we want to wish everybody a really happy new year. And so we'll have our outros here. Chef, where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can get a hold of me at Chef to Left B on Twitter. Tweet at me. I know I go back and forth with some things that are off the wall and maybe out of left field, but I always love a good debate. I like shooting the puck around about players and all that. So you can reach me there. Chef to Left B on Twitter.
You got it, Dan.
Yeah, I'm available on Twitter at dsilver88. And yeah, happy holidays to everyone. Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. All that stuff. I hope everyone has a great holiday.
Yeah, fantastic. I hope you're feeling a little bit better in the next few days. And you can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520. And again, O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter with the O&B Puckcast. And with that, until next time, probably after the first of the year, everybody, have a great holiday. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe out there, okay? And take care.